Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into Talking Shop in partnership with the Coffee Breakers. Today, we're at Rally's headquarters in New York City with Rob himself. Rob Petrozzo, how are you, my friend?
Doing right, man. Good to see you. I'm glad you got to pop in on your New York adventures, pop into our humble abode and have a conversation about some cool stuff.
It's very nice in here, and I will say, you've got some very nice cards too. You've got some look-and-sees here, obviously the most valuable on the table. I'm just kidding. Excited to show off some of this stuff, but first, I wanted to talk about Rally for a second. I've been buying and selling stuff, actually just buying stuff on Rally. Everything's, I'm too emotionally attached to everything to even do anything with it. But you guys take really big items, both literally and figuratively, and fractionally sell them. But you guys started with cars and now do cards, dinosaurs, watches, everything.
Yeah.
How did it start?
So it was myself and my partners Chris and Max. So like we've been collectors of all things for a long, long time. We've known each other forever. But there was this massive gap between the people who had the knowledge and were part of like every conversation and had it be a part of their daily life, all their collections, and the people who had the museum quality stuff. So for us, like the idea, we knew we wanted to work together on something, was how do we leverage the stuff that we know and care about, the huge enthusiast communities around it, and also get the best in class museum quality assets and make them accessible. So that was like the lane we wanted to sort of work on, was democratizing the space. So when we started in putting this on paper in like 2015, it wasn't like now. The idea of like fractionalization wasn't a thing yet. And so we had to explain the fact that there were these people who, if you allowed them to buy and sell equity in these assets, they would A, want to do that, but B, potentially have it be like a complement to their collection. So the one that maybe is the PSA 1 or the PSA 2 or the PSA 3, or the ungraded Babe Ruth and the look and see,
right?
Which is a couple $1,000 card now, but it's also not something that's like the Gaudy Babe Ruth or the Sporting News or any of the ones we start going back to the real Babe Ruth rookie cards, which are untouchable. So we knew that there were people that would want to do this, that would understand all the dynamics around a lot of these assets. And we started with cars because that was the hardest asset class to do. It's this giant sort of, bulky piece of steel. You got to store it somewhere and insure it in a specific way, and you have to roll the tires, and it's got this massive community around it. And it was something that Chris, my co-founder, came to me and he was like, yo, let's build this thing and we'll build it around cars to start, and here's the reasons. And to me, like, I've always loved cars, but it made complete sense. And we named it Rally, knowing that where we would get eventually. So if we all wanted Frank Thomas rookie cards, we all wanted Griffey rookie cards, but it wasn't because that was an investment, but we did think if you kept those in perfect condition, it was going to be worth a lot of money later, because no one knew what the populations were, no one knew what the price comps were. We just knew that these guys were like our guys. These were like the new stars. In retrospect, we should have been just buying up every 86 Fleer Jordan card. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's what this Mickey Mantle card is for the sport of basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of big cards, you happen to have some just, hanging out here.
Yeah, typically these are typically in our vault. And then today you were coming here, so we had to make sure the security was here and all the stuff was out, because I didn't want you to come and not have something good to look at.
Brinks trucks galore,
They're
all around the block. So walk us through these cards here.
Yeah. So to your point, you have like these. Every sport has its thing, and every asset class has its thing. So when it comes to like video games, is Mario, and when it comes to sort of political memorabilia, it's like the Declaration of Independence broadsides, which we have. But when you think about sports, there's 86 Fleer Jordan. 52 Mantle is the be-all, end-all for baseball. Still, even though the T206 Wagner is still like the poster child for collecting in a lot of places.
Like sports cards as a whole is the Wagner,
right? Because there's a story that goes with it, which may or may not be accurate and has changed a little bit over time. But it's a very special thing. And the 52 Mantle, for what it's worth, has that too. So these cards almost didn't make it too. And this is like the story of Topps, basically. It's the idea that there's these two guys. They're in Brooklyn. This isn't selling. This particular car was the second in the second set that went along with this 52 set. So it was like the second set of boxes. They thought it was going to be a hit. There was bad seasonality. They put it in stores at the wrong time. It didn't sell. These got dumped in the Atlantic Ocean. You know what I mean? So when you think about scarcity value, there's no real feel for how many.
That's such a crazy concept.
It's not. It's like, yeah, I'm so mad about this. I'm taking it out of an empty warehouse and throwing it into the ocean, like into the Hudson. It's a wild. It would never happen today, but back then, to think like the kind of the rookie card, the second year-ish rookie card, the real rookie card for this superstar, and like, you know, the birth of Topps comes from this is an interesting story. To think it's dumped into the ocean and that there's, you know, potentially thousands sitting at the bottom of the Atlantic is wild too. This is the card I think about when I think about like the hobby and collecting in general is always going to be the SB2 mantle. But to that same point, like what's happened with Pokemon between 99 and now, and with this Charizard card in particular,
the face of it.
It become not just like from a card game perspective, but it's become like this face of new school collecting, because you have these kids who grew up playing this and trading it and really using it as a utility and not thinking about equity at all. And it happened so quick with Pokemon, and the numbers are so low, and the population's particular card is like this generational thing too, where everybody that grew up in the 90s and in the early 2000s recognizes what Charizard is relative to Pokemon and that whole universe. And it's also similar to the Yankees. That's like a franchise that is just so massive and will withstand
the biggest entertainment franchise
ever, yeah.
And it did so in 20 years, as opposed to like the number 2, which is Star Wars.
Everybody thinks about like Disney franchises as like the be all end all, but like Pokemon and number 2 might have been like was it Hello Kitty? I forget. Like it's one of those things where there's no Pokemon theme park, but if they opened it tomorrow,
well, I know the second biggest entertainment franchise is Star Wars.
Yeah.
Pokemon's done 95 billion in the last 20 years. Star Wars has done 40 and 40.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
That's why I think about like in terms of relevance, it feels like Pokemon will be relevant forever. And this particular card, the pop it's at, and the set that it was part of, which is this real kickoff, the base set from '99, is a super, super important card in collecting in general, because that opens the door for everything. And the reason that you have Yu-Gi-Oh! And the reason that you have so many of these, and like Magic is always a little ancillary to Pokemon to a certain degree, but the reason that like games in general still exist in this analog form, I think Pokemon had a lot to do with that. That's why that card becomes a really important part of the culture. If you look at the zoom out from 52 to now, it's a very nice up and to the right line. Pokemon is way more volatile, and especially recently.
Looks like a cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I think because the same kids that are looking at Pokemon as an investment in crypto too. You know what I mean? So
hey, that's
like,
me, man.
That's a little bit more volatility, but it's something that like these kids stomach that. I'm using these kids relative to you're sitting next to one of those kids.
Yeah.
Like they are so much more savvy than I was at your age, and can they eat those dips, man. They want to buy every dip. You know what I mean? They look at it as an opportunity. I looked at it. I was running for the hills every time I would lose money on anything, even on paper. So it's an interesting dynamic the way these two kind of work together.
Now this PSA 9 from 58.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that guy.
So this is considered the real Pele rookie card, which is about the size of a stamp too. So this is part of a bigger set. It's something that when you look at this card, you say like, yeah, this is a $400,000-$500,000 card. It makes not a lot of sense to somebody who's used to seeing this standard size card, but it's also something that this is one of the greatest athletes of all time. And when you think about soccer and the renaissance it's had with collectors and the run that it's on right now, and that's women's soccer, that's U.S. soccer. It's the soccer that's not just pure European male-dominated soccer that we've come to know as like football. But this particular card is still the most expensive card in the hobby, which seems crazy thinking about the Messis and the Ronaldos of the world and what the new school in every single U.S. sport, what their prices are doing. The fact that at around $400,000, $250,000, still the most expensive soccer card on earth is crazy. But Pele was like that larger-than-life figure that I think a lot of people now don't realize how famous he actually was. And what's getting all the attention lately, I called that a sport. That's weird to me. You know what it is? It is a sport. It's like a kid's card game feels like a sport.
I think it's a sport.
When you're young and you're playing Pokemon, it's a sport.
If chess is a sport, Pokemon is a sport too.
Damn, that's a good buzz. That's a nice
bar.
soundbite. That's a bar. I start using that. But this is one where it's the Gretzky rookie is a weird one because there's the O-Pee-Chee version, which is like the Canadian brother of Topps to some degree. That's considered the rarer, and the one that gets the real rookie distinction for hockey. But the Topps version is actually a one of two in the PSA 10. And this is one that's trading around $1 million right now in Rally. It had a comp over $1 million last month in a private sale. And that one's gone into private collection now. So the only actual Gretzky Topps rookie in circulation is this one. It's like like Mario Brothers as a franchise, from an investment standpoint, video games are on a little bit of a run right now, outside of Rally, like everywhere. They're just something that has a lot of the same dynamics of they made million, like this particular Mario.
Speaking of.
Yeah, I mean, I said that. So, they printed 40 million Mario Brothers, you know what I mean? Like games. And if you got that game, this is my generation, not your generation thing.
Right.
Yours is like maybe Halo. I don't know what it would be for your generation. Like more
Probably.
Like but like,
I'm not that young.
yeah, but it's like, you know what, you're more trophy rich. Right? But when they made 40 million or 50 million or something, or even 10 million or 12 million, think about like Mario 3 and some of the other pieces.
It was like Mario Kart and Nintendo DS. That was my childhood.
But that's like, you're talking about Mario Kart for 64 is the same thing for my generation.
Right.
And Bond for 64. But who on earth, what maniac got this game and did not rip it open and immediately start playing it? So to have something like this, which this is the most expensive Mario Brothers known to exist. So this is around a $700,000 for the third or fourth print of this individual game. It's the hang tab version. It's got the early seals. It's never been opened. It was encased as 9.8 A+. So this is the equivalent of the PSA 10 mantle to a certain degree. But it's one where
this is the craziest thing in the world.
Reports right now. But this is one of so few relative to the tens of millions that were made. And it's a franchise that will live forever, in my opinion. But in the opinion of culture, it's just one of those things where there's always a new SKU, there's always a new game that comes out. It's going to translate to digital so easily without having to be analog. There's theme parks. It's something that has the look and feel of a Disney, but has an investable asset that everybody recognizes. And that's what we always try and go for. And
this is graded a 9.8, which is insane for a video game.
I mean, that's like for anything that's 20, 30, almost 40 years old, it's wild to keep it in a condition that allows it to be graded so high. This is the equivalent of having come off the assembly line, the production line, getting its first seal, and then being like hermetically sealed and not touched for 30 years, basically.
The amount of natural disasters that this wouldn't have survived if in the wrong house, warehouse, location over that time period is all my mind goes to when I think about stuff like that.
Yeah, that's the right way to think about it. Because that's the same thing with cars. It's like everybody, a lot of people had, trying to think of a good rookie card that everybody kind of had that was my age. Like Pokemon
Probably
cards.
Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan might be it. Jordan could be it. But everybody had Pokemon cards passed through their hand. But no one was thinking like, all right, let me touch this with a pair of gloves, let me put it outside of natural light, let me keep it tucked away somewhere and then check back in 20 years. There's so many trophy hunters who only want that 9.8 A+. And there's so few of them. When you think about the earliest prints, like Prince 1 and 2 and the test market Marios that were just sticker sealed, going to the cellophane sealed and like the 3rd, 4th, 5th prints, the numbers are so low considering how many were made. To have it in any condition that represents something almost pristine is unheard of.
Craziest stuff, man. All right, should we show off something else?
Yeah, what do you want to go with? Do you want to do want to go to Harry Potter? This is a similar dynamics, man. Same thing where it's like, it's kind of like a, one of those things where the name recognition alone is enough to elicit an emotional response from someone. So when we started thinking about going into vintage literature, and we do this for every asset class, we want to get the best in class and launch with something that everybody's going to recognize, but also has the investment appeal where, it's relevant right now, but that parabolic move hasn't happened. It's something where we feel like there's a chance it could happen, but again, never investment advice. We have no idea where these are going to go. And nobody can really influence a market in such a way that changes the entire marketplace. A few people have the attention and they can talk about something, but to say, people are going to really care about this, or to say like there will be a new movie series or a new book comes out, or something that goes along with the franchise is really tough to predict. This particular book and this version of Harry Potter, and just so everyone knows, like with books, you're not supposed to wear gloves when you go through pages because you can't feel like the actual hand of the page and it gets a little bit dangerous. But this is a very
It's similar with cards, right?
Similar, yeah, like going through the pack type of
Right,
thing.
because if you're wearing a glove, the end of the glove could touch and damage the card without you knowing that it's touching
100%. It. So with Harry Potter, there were the equivalent of 500 individual copies that were printed in the first run. And it was called Philosopher's Stone, and there were some spelling errors in it, and J.K. Rowling's name appears differently in a couple of places.
There are spelling errors in this book.
Yeah, there's 1 or 2 inside the book. And it's one of those things where it's weird now thinking back how massive this franchise is and how much money it's actually made. and that J.K. Rowling's a billionaire off of this book. But when this first came out, it wasn't necessarily like the immediately in high favor. Everyone's gonna go crazy for it. So this is one of the first couple hundred copies. A couple went to these were the ones that they either was split
this
up.
A bookstore copy or
Yeah,
a library copy?
Library copy. Yeah.
Right.
And that's like when you look at this particular copy. This was in the original publisher's office, and his wife at the time, who worked at the publisher, but not in the children's book wing, in a different group, went into the office, pulled it off the bookshelf, liked the cover, and inscribed it to her nephew. And it was one of those ones where like the nephew read it and loved it, and that was before everything went out and went public, and it became like this really great story that goes along with the book too.
This is a crazy.
And it's like we try and find stuff that has like that type of lineage or has that story that goes with it. But when you think about, great literature, and you think about the, starting with the Shakespeare, and then going through like the Jack Kerouac on the roads, and you start thinking about some of the art books that came out along the way. There's some great titles, and there's stuff that has crazy history. And we have like, a great first edition, The Great Gatsby, and we have a great On the Road, and we have like some of these awesome books that got a ton of attention for their time. When you think about the next 100 years,
nothing is as big as Harry
Potter. It feels
Potter.
like Harry Potter is one of those books that a young, savvy investor who also read this and read the whole series and saw all the movies is going to gravitate.
That nostalgia is so real. And two, you mentioned the importance of provenance for something like this. That is the only thing that matters with historical collecting.
Yeah, outside of cars. So when we sort of think about investments as a category and alternative assets as a category, it's hard to deny what watches have done. And they've done it for a very select group. I think that's one of the ones when we think about democratization. Watch collectors and wine collectors kind of live in their own world, where a lot of them are they go super deep on the knowledge of individual assets, and it's one that, from a democratization standpoint, there's a lot of conversation and story, and there's a lot of sort of depth of knowledge that goes along with a watch. So this particular one, we want to do one that has a well-known name, so Rolex, but also has a story behind it that makes it a very unique Rolex. So this is the Beta 5100. Under 1,000 made. There was some that were gold, and then another set that weren't. But the yellow gold version are the ones that I think people look at now as yellow gold's kind of come back around and became a thing again. This is one that has a lot of heritage that goes along with it with Rolex. So this is a quartz Rolex too. So when everyone knows like the sweeping hand of Rolex, where it's an automatic movement, this one kind of ticks the same way like a Swatch watch or any quartz watch would do, which is very, very rare for Rolex. But also in terms of like the one of 700 hand-numbered Rolex, it's one that was a little bit bulkier, a little bit bigger, had some different mechanics and inner workings. It kind of set the stage for Rolex to do some really weird stuff and unique stuff outside of just what they were known for, which at that point was the day dates and going into the Datejust and the Oyster Perpetuals. So this was like an early Rolex, an early example, a one of X, which is rare for Rolex that's kind of available. It was very much under the radar. It looks way different. It was called the Texan because it was like this bigger, bulkier watch. And it's something that set the table for a lot of what Rolex is able to do now and change the storytelling from just the 3 or 4 SKUs that they were known for. So this was a $20,000 initial offering, which is trading up, I believe, from where it was, right around that range right now. Though it's one that, a little bit esoteric, but something that has a great story behind it in terms of the way the brand developed after this watch came out in the 70s. It's one that, a little bit esoteric, but something that has a great story behind it in terms of the way the brand developed after this watch came out in the 70s.
Super cool, man. All right, now I wanted to talk about this, which, here, we'll move that out of the way, which you gifted me today, which is actually ridiculous. So thank you again.
I think I'm coming through. And it's also like, I gotta say, man, I think I've told this before, but for someone in their early 20s to go for what I think to a lot of people is the road less traveled with collectibles and think about something that's from, 200, 300 years ago.
Right,
that's
as cool.
Very rare, and say that's cool is very rare in this world that's dominated by NBA highlights. You know what I mean? So I gotta give you credit for that. And in preparation for what will be our Declaration of Independence initial offering, we're starting to sort of find some really cool stuff that's based around it. And this is a signed John Hancock document from accepting a ship full of, there was some liquor and a bunch of grain and like tea that was being delivered to a harbor that he had to sign off on. And this was like one of those early documents that he put a really nice, that's the thing, you know this with presidential and political signatures.
Of course.
The quality of signature is something that gets looked at as a big part of how it gets graded and kind of like what the what the value of that asset is, and it's like a really clean autograph. So it felt like it might have a good spot in your collection. I didn't want to have you not have it. I didn't want you to leave here without something, you know what I mean?
Thank you. This is super cool. And, John Hancock obviously being probably the most well-known American signature ever, because he was the first Declaration of Independence signer and the largest.
Yeah, it's also one of those weird things where it's like, put your John Hancock on this, becomes part of like the zeitgeist.
Right.
And those things that work their way into culture and become relevant as like a verb or in a way that it's outside of just the purview of what they were, what they did, is always something that tends to sort of elicit a certain response. And that's one of those things that we always look forward to.
Absolutely. Are these, what are they?
So these are every ring, the team issue rings from both the Jordan's three-peat. So every Jordan, all 6 of Jordan's championships in Chicago. And these were given to John Capps, who was like a security guard. You probably recognize him from Last Dance. He kind of became Jordan's personal security, and that was his guy. He'd hang out with him and gamble with him, and he was always there. If you saw Jordan for any of these three-peats, anywhere outside of Chicago especially, you'd always see Capps with him. So there's only so many people who were either on staff or on team for the entire Jordan era, and were there through '98, and he was one of them. So these are the rings that were, like, you see them kind of over time as they got a little bit more over the top, I think. And we recognize, like, you think about Super Bowl rings and the crazy rings now, and it's just like a bucket of diamonds on somebody's hands.
As it should be.
As it should be. No, this is one of the chip. It should be like that. But this was from an era where, like, the Bulls, and man, I don't want to age myself or talk to you like this, but this was like a different era. Like the
That's what everybody said.
It's a crazy thing. I saw Jordan play a few times. I was too young I'd be lying if I said I remember it. And I saw one game in Chicago when my aunt lived there. But the hype around Michael Jordan and even Scottie Pippen, and like thinking about it in terms of like video games where they didn't put Jordan in the NBA Jam because he had his own licensing deals, his own sneaker, all that stuff, everything he did was so new. And to your point, we talked about it, there's a lot of Jordan, 86 Fleer Jordan rookie cards.
Right.
The other stuff that goes with it, whether it's ticket stubs or it's something like the signed sneakers, the stuff that hasn't gotten the same automatic attention as that 86 Fleer card, the rings are something that are just pure one of one. To have every single year of both three-peats and do that with somebody who was close to Jordan was going to be an important part of what we did here at Rally, is getting those stories. So having like the full set here was like, there's always something we've always thought about, like rings. You think about like Tom Brady's Super Bowl ring. You think about a couple other rings that are really important. The Jordan three-peats are a very specific thing, and like the photo of Jordan with all the rings on that was part of a Nike promo was the tail end of that, the period on the sentence. To have all of those was going to be a really important part of what we built, so we were looking for those for a minute. So
crazy. So crazy. Well, when the Hornets win, you're going to need another one.
That's a crazy statement to me.
No. So how much are these worth?
They traded down, so it's one of those esoteric assets too that I think has to, over time, we truly believe in all these assets. This is one that the market, I think, is still trying to grasp and understand what the value could be, and it's hard when there's no comp. So this one opened at around a little over 300,000. I think it's trading closer to 2 right now. And again, this is not at all investment advice, but it's something that, again, a one of one. You're not going to see a set of 6. I would go out on a limb and say you're not going to see a set of 6 for the Jordan championships anytime soon.
Because who are the other people that Mike has one? I imagine.
Yeah. So I mean, everybody. So you have like the Mikes and the Pippins and the core 4 of that team, which went through both three-peats, and then you have coaching staff, and then a couple again like. Jordan was one of those guys Jordan was a gambler. He was like a superstitious gambler too, and every story we hear is that he had this group of 5 or 6 people around him that he kept tight and made sure they were always taken care of. And like John Capps was one of those guys. A few other people that you saw on Last Dance were those guys too, and they kind of have their set. But there's always...
Did he auction them off at some point?
So at a certain point, the family did.
Got it.
And it was something where I believe it was the daughter, and we were gonna... There was a few ways to get our hands on these. We had to buy them individually at auction, this particular set. And we had to do them in a way that we had to sort of put together. And when we got to 5, getting the 6th was going to be like, that was a must-have. And there's certain games like the 98's, a little bit more expensive, obviously. And first title is always a little bit more expensive. But as a whole, we priced those out as one set, knowing that was probably the one of one. But you think about now, like, individual players that get rings now, you get, if you're a Tom Brady, you get kind of like 3 or 4, and you can give one to family, and they're your ring with your name on it. So now it's a little different. Back then, like, you had to be an integral part of what was happening to get the team issue ring. Like, that was a very, very specific thing back then. A lot of people don't know this, and this is, I'll give credit to Greg Benelli, one of our investors. He coined this, the Declaration of Independence, America's rookie card, and that's how we've kind of been marketing it to a certain
That's
degree.
great. That's a good line.
Yeah.
That's a bar.
That's a bar. That's a bar. You got bars. This is it's a broadside copy of the Declaration of Independence. So we're gonna do some really cool stuff around it. It's the equivalent of like the first edition copy. So there's the one that everybody, that was handwritten, that everybody sees and knows about from like high school and from middle school. That's in the Rotunda in DC. We have one of the first sort of a 1 of 20 copy. These are the first ones that were printed out, that were signed and delivered to individual colonies. So this was from Exeter, New Hampshire. The one that was kind of read like the town square, and that's like the equivalent of a first edition copy of the Declaration of Independence. That's going to be a $2 million offering coming up soon.
Crazy. All right. Well, this has been insane. Thank you again, and we'll be back sometime soon.
Awesome. Doors always open, man.
Boom.